Get started.
Okay, going to live. 10, 9, done.
All right.
Hold on. Honeybee, you can get started telling them what the event is about.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Apologies for technical difficulties, but we are here for you now. This is the Melanated Vote. And we have some amazing panelists, and I have an amazing co-moderator. Vaughn, how are you today?
Doing good. I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here. Happy to, dig into this discussion and tap on some, some things that are extremely important right now. And I know our panelists, we have amazing panelists ready to deep dive into this conversation.
Absolutely. And so the Melanated Vote is a conversation for melanated people in America. But if you're across the nation and you can identify, it's for you too. This is a conversation about how we can take control of our vote. We take our power back and we decide and dictate who gets into office, how and why. And we're going to talk about all of it. We're going to talk about the past, the present, and the future of the Melanated Vote. And as we get ready to dive into that, as you guys are coming into the live stream, we're going to introduce our amazing, I'm going to say this again because it's so true and necessary to say, our amazing panelists. And so before we do that, I'll tell you a little bit about myself as moderator, and then I'll let Vaughn go ahead and tell you a little bit about himself as moderator, and then we'll hop into the panelists. So my name is Natalie Battles. I am the founder of Melanated in America, which is a production company as well as event company to highlight, promote, and tell the stories of everything melanated in America. And it includes events like these and talking about issues, whether that be through our media content or through our events, topics and issues that impact the melanated community. And so I'm really, really excited to have this event. And I'll let my wonderful co-host Vaughn introduce himself as well.
How you doing? I'm Vaughn Rowland. Thank you for that, Natalie. Vaughn Rowland. I am a political affairs and public affairs consultant here in Chicago, Illinois. I worked on several federal, state, and Chicago-wide campaigns consulting as well. I'm extremely passionate about this subject. It's been, basically what I've breathed and eaten for like the past 10 years. So I'm extremely happy and grateful to be here and ready to get into this discussion.
Hey now. All right. So now we can dive deep into our fantastic panel. Let's meet the panelists. All right. First up, we have Alderman Jeanette Taylor. Miss Taylor, would you please tell us a little bit about your journey and what you are doing now?
So I have the pleasure of being Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor of the 20th Ward in Chicago. I represent the communities of Woodlawn, Washington Park, Back of the Yards, New City, Inglewood, and Greater Grand Crossing. So I have a pretty big ward that I represent. And I was an organizer. I was on the local school council for 22 years. And I have dedicated my life to service to others. And the last thing I'll say is I actually went on a 30-day hunger strike to save our last neighborhood high school in the Kenwood Oakland community in Chicago. And so I'm excited to be here tonight. I wasn't part of the party. I was the person that they didn't see coming. In a race of 21 people, it came down to then 9 and then 2, and I was just blessed to be chosen to 1. And so I'm just looking forward tonight for us having real conversations about voting, why people do or don't, and just knowing that strong people don't need strong leaders. We're the people we've been waiting on.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Yes.
Alderwoman. Amazing. Couldn't have said that last part better myself. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to our next amazing panelist. We have Marquise Averitt. Marquise, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. My name is Marquise Averitt. I like to say that I am an activist by passion, but an organizer by training. I've worked on campaigns from electoral to issue-based all over the country. And I like to just say that Chicago has a special place in my heart. In the 1950s, my great-grandmother left the South and headed to Chicago during what's known as the Great Migration. So I've been to Chicago over a dozen times, and the Windy City is a place that I love, and I'm just always grateful for all of the work that you all are doing there on the ground. Thank you, Natalie, for having me here.
No worries. Thank you for being on. I can't wait to hear your input on this conversation. And we can get ready to move on to our next panelist, which is Paris Walker Thomas. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background and what you're working on now?
Hi, my name is Paris Walker Thomas. Are we ready? Okay, this seems like a little difficult. Okay, my name is Paris Walker Thomas. I am running for I'm a write-in candidate for the 28th District of Illinois. That area includes Orland Hills, Calumet Park, Robbins, the 9th and the 34th Ward, Blue Island, Midlothian, and Oak Forest, and Orland Hills. So I ran for office as a write-in candidate as well last year for the 34th Ward alderman. And this year I was proudly on the ballot for 3 weeks. And now as an alternative, I chose to run as a write-in candidate so that I have that opportunity. And I would like to thank you, Natalie, for having me on. And I look forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. And our last amazing panelist, Mr. Paymon Rami. Can you please come on and tell us a little bit about your journey?
Well, first of all, thank you, Natalie, for having me on, and especially with my alderwoman, how she was defined, Jeanette. Congratulations to her. My journey has been long, and so I won't go into a lot of details. However, I will say that I became involved with the civil rights movement in the 1960s when I was a student organizer for Citywide Boycott in 1968, where we organized 35,000 young people to walk out for the purpose of getting Black history and education and teachers and businesses and schools. I also worked on the campaigns of A.A. Rayner and of Gus Savage as a teenager. Aside from that, I spent 5 years as the Director of Education and Public Programs at the DeSalvo Museum of African American History. And I am a filmmaker, having done such films as Mahogany, Blues Brothers, Spook Who Sat by the Door, and most recently 93 Days, which I did in Nigeria, starring Danny Glover, that is currently on Amazon and Netflix.
Well, thank you, everyone, for I know your schedules are busy. I know it's tight. So I really appreciate you all coming on and being here with us today. It's super important to have this conversation. As we were stating before we went on live, we don't have to speak that amongst ourselves, but we definitely want to get to each and every point for our audience. And thank you everyone who's out there watching. We appreciate you for being with us. And it's time to get started. We're gonna dive into
Yes,
this.
it is.
We are going to dive into this. So we have a few different topics that we are going to discuss today. And I want to start with the history of the melanated vote or the Black vote to kind of put everything in context for people. And my first question, and this is open to everyone, is why do you all, if you feel it's important for us today to know about the history of the Black vote or the melanated vote? Alderwoman?
So I think it's important to talk about the history, and I'll go, I guess, to remembering Harold Washington being the first Black mayor of the city of Chicago, and how it just wasn't the Black vote, but it was a rainbow of coalition of folks who actually were able to get Harold Washington into office. And sometimes I think we're quick to forget the lesson of folks died for us to be able to vote, and how we have the voting right acts that they have to vote on every year in voting. And so we never talk about that, the thought that folks of color are still treated like second-class citizens in a country we helped build. And so I understand why people don't vote. Don't get me wrong. We got some electeds who will knock on your door, beg you to death to ask you for your vote. And then during their 4 years, they forget about you. They actually forget that they actually work for constituents. And I'll just say this for Jeanette. I make $120,000 a year. I get a raise every year. I got free dental and I got good health insurance, which is something I've never had in the course of my life. And I have the great taxpayers of the city of Chicago to thank. And so clearly I understand who I work for. Can't say that about some of my coworkers, but we truly have to understand that our vote actually counts. And we have to talk about holding people accountable. And I think that's a piece that are missing. And so I used to say, if you'd asked me 3 years ago to run for office, I'd have been like, no, these folks is lazy. They don't do nothing. And they are making my life miserable. We paying high taxes. They allow candy stores and liquor stores to be in my community, and they haven't listened to me. But I also have learned that even if you don't get in politics, it's going to get into you. And so you think about the census. The census is done every 10 years, but we wait till the year that it needs to be done to be pushing census vote. Same thing with elections. We're going to wait to 2023 to talk about candidates when we should be doing that work now. And so we got to go back to civics. Civics is not taught in Chicago public schools. It's just not. Or it ain't taught at schools on the South and West side. And so think of an earlier age as just like you teaching the story of Christopher Columbus. If I knew that Black women helped get the space shuttle into the country, the first space shuttle into space, who's to say what I would be? And so it's us actually teaching those lessons, but also standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, which I feel like too often we don't do. We don't go back and explain what people actually went through to be able to vote.
Thank you. Mr. Rami, I know you raised your hand.
Okay, so first of all, to be able to move forward, you really do have to functionally understand the history and where you came from. Okay, so let's just take a look at the 19th Amendment, first of all. The 19th Amendment was passed in 1920. The 19th Amendment was designed for women or gave women the right to vote, specifically white women. Didn't give Black women the right to vote, or Black people in general. That wasn't until 1965. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed, which allowed us supposedly the ability to be able to vote. However, when we talk about why we have voted, and I know that a lot of times we say that Black people died for the right to vote, and a lot of them did. A lot of Black people died at polling places or in the South fighting for the right for us to be able to cast a vote. However, the struggle was never about voting. it was about freedom. Voting was a technique to get to the essence of what freedom is. So as we begin to talk about voting, the context for voting has to be our, as a people, freedom. Because if it's not that, then why are we embodying this effort at all? Politics is fundamentally about passing around resources. That is what the purpose of being in politics is, to pass around resources. It is a phenomenon that white people never have to worry about who's in office because they, irrespective of who is elected, are going to be passed some resources. They are going to get the things that will improve the quality of their lives. So as we begin to look at why we are voting, we can't vote for people because they look good, because they're sassy, because they walk cool. We have to look at what are they providing in terms of resources, and what is it as a nation that is going to get us closer to freedom.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's right on point. So
Absolutely.
just to kind of follow up there, would you say there's sort of this ancestral disconnect when it comes to the effectiveness of voting and civic participation for African Americans in this country?
I think that the biggest disconnect is that we are voting for the purpose of being accepted and not for freedom. Our struggle in this country has to be to raise the quality of our general lives, not to be given breadcrumbs and to be accepted at the ends of the table. Our lives should be about building a table, about having, I made a speech not too long ago, and I was a group of white people, and I asked them, did they know that Black people in the history of this country have never burnt down their communities? Every time we've talked about riots, they have talked about the fact that Black people have burned down their community. We've never done it. Have we ever burnt down Chatham? Have we ever burnt down Ladera Heights in LA? Have we ever burned down any community that we truly owned? No. We have only burned down communities in which we have been captured, in which we have been contained, or unless somebody didn't know the way the wind was blowing and it just happened to, burn down somebody's Black business. But the reality is that we've never done it, and so I think that since we have been taken to this country, we have been trying to get back to freedom. And people have thrown tools out in front of us to say that these are some steps that you can take to allow us to respect you enough to consider your freedom. Not even enough for the Voters' Right Act to be ad infinitum, in perpetuity, forever and ever and ever. Because that's what it should have been for a long time ago. And it doesn't matter whether it was Democrats or Republicans, our fate has always been the same. So it comes down to, what is it that we need to improve the quality of our lives, and who's going to be the person to help us enough to open the door for us to find a way to do it for ourselves? Because ultimately, we have to do it for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the point of the conversation. Figuring out how we can get educated and we can come together as a whole and do it for ourselves.
And one other point, Natalie, the other thing is that we have the tendency to only vote. The hard work starts after you vote. It's not when you vote. It's when you get together with your elected officials and you call them to task and you make sure that the things in your community are what you want them to be, that you get on those committees, that you help, that you're at their backs to support their efforts. That's when it starts. We have the tendency, I voted, I'm done. Not enough.
I like to say there's always this thing of a need for holistic civic engagement. So that goes past just walking to a voter booth, that goes past just, filling out a ballot. You have to ensure that you are engaged at every single level of your community. So you're ensuring that you're at a parent teachers conference, and that may be on Zoom now, but given the time frame, but you have to be there. You got to be ensuring that that you're on a board for something and within your community as well, and holding people to task and ensuring that those resources are coming back to your community. So it can't just stop at voting, to your point.
Absolutely. And I know Paris had her hand raised as well.
It goes back to what we were discussing before. We had some technical difficulties that we need to be collectively held accountable as well as a race. That's one. Two, we need to understand it is our responsibility to be involved in politics and government. So in order to be involved and educated and a part of it, you have to know what you're fighting for, in a sense. And I totally agree with your statement saying that, if you don't know, you'll keep voting the same people in office, and it'll stop our freedom from prevailing to be better. So if you don't use your right, you lose that. And you don't just stop right after the election. No. And that's the reason we've become a little lazy, because we've gotten to the point where we've actually let the government take charge and not question them or not ask, what are they doing? What is the responsibility of their position, and how does it affect me on a day-to-day level or life? In my position, state representative, it is my job to provide legislation to be heard in Springfield on the behalf of my constituents. That is a job that a state representative is supposed to, and also be an activist within the community, to be a part of that community, to also do the work. You just don't stop because you have a title and that you were elected to that title, and you become a committeeman or a township member or whatever the case may be. You have to still be consciously engaged with your neighbors, your family, your friends. That's why I say, when we vote, do we actually look on the list of candidates? I don't think so. I think we've gotten to the point where we go to the polls, we wait for someone to shove something in our face, and we look and say, yeah, that's the one. No, take your time. It's not a rush. It's not a rush. And I believe because the climate that we are in, we've been rushing, and that's why we end up with the same people every single time. We have to start from the history. And that goes back to the book that I was reading about Harold Washington and the Black Power. Harold Washington and the Crisis of Black Power in Chicago. This book explains every single thing that is going on right now in Chicago politics, because it's so unique and it's still so prevalent and present right now as we are engaging in the election. We're becoming conscious, yes, but it's almost like we've waited 45 years to make a little difference. No, we should have been involved. We should have been more alert and say, hey, but now we're getting conscious and now we're getting educated. So as candidates and people that are embarking in politics, it's our job to give and provide the education, and also like the option. I'm a write-in candidate. I was on the ballot, now I'm not. So now you have to do a little research and find me. It's almost like a game in a sense, like tag you're it, but you have to find me. And I would prefer that people look for me so that they can see how I'm involved in my community and also a little bit about me, because that would help you as far as making a decision to write my name, or saying, hey, is she going to be the same, or is she's going to be involved? Oh, no, don't just vote because she's Black and she's going to be for us. You need to know the people that you're voting for. You have to do the research, and in my instance, they have to research me, and that's an honor to have, to actually be looked for, and it gives me a insight that say people are actually reading what they're or reading and looking and researching for their candidate.
And I think that's one thing we definitely have to come back to, is really thinking about how we approach voting. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But Marquise, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that this has been a great conversation, but we also must remember that the only ones who can change public policy are elected officials, and the only ones who elect elected officials are voters. So the only way we really can make a difference is by making sure that we are uh, putting up candidates that share our vision, but also supporting them. So it's not just good enough to say, hey, man, I got your back. But we also got to put our money where our mouth is. And we got to get out and we got to knock on doors. And we got to get out and we got to make phone calls to get our candidates elected to office. The great John Lewis oftentimes would say that if you see something that's not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. And when we look around in the world, there's a question that's asked every 4 years. Is the world better now than it was 4 years ago? And I think that when we look around and we see 220,000 dead, and we see millions now unemployed, and we see tens of millions of people now without health insurance during a once in a generation global pandemic, there's something wrong right now. And so, you know, some would call it vote shaming, but I feel like if I got to shame you just a little bit in order for you to know how important it is to get out and vote, that there's too much on the line for us to sit back and act as if that we may have another chance other than November the 3rd. And so I agree with each and every one of you. My goodness, this has been a tremendous conversation. I think that we certainly also have to just stop selecting Black people simply because they are Black. There are so many people in office that are Black and mean our community no good, have been sitting in office for 20 and 30 and 40 years. And the only thing that has grown is their pocketbook. But when you look at what has transpired in our community, it seems like that we've been like the Israelites and we've been walking around for 400 years. And so eventually the question becomes, how can we play a part in this a great American experiment? And I think that white people realize that voting is important. Let me tell you something. I've only been in politics for a short time, but I realized that you don't have to tell white people and Republicans that November the 3rd is voting day. They going regardless. But with Democrats, you got to call their phone, you got to text them, you got to show up at their church, call their mama, make sure you send something by grandma's house. And you got to do all of these different efforts for them to do something that they should be wanting to do. We are the ones that need it the most. And so I think that that we have the power right now. And not only do white people realize that we have the power and they're doing everything in their power to keep us from voting, but also white Democrats realize that we have the power. And that's the reason why they were willing to put up a Black VP. And that's the reason why a lot of the top senior aides are now Black. It's because they realize the power of the Black vote. And I think that when Black people realize the power of the Black vote, it's one thing to say my vote doesn't mean something and there's only a 15% voter turnout rate. You know what I mean? So we can argue that. But when there's a 70% voter turnout rate, let's get the voter turnout rate to 60, 70, or 80%, and then say that voting doesn't matter. The only way we can win this game in America is through elections. Now, is that our only option? No, we certainly have to do more than that. We have to do yes and. But I believe that the best way that we can make our voices heard is by voting in the candidates that don't necessarily share our complexion, but understand our need for protection from a fascist government. So
Absolutely.
I think, yeah, you hit that right on the head, Marquis.
He hit it on point. Yep.
He hit it on point. On point,
Yes.
man. I would say, I would add to that. You often hear like you said, like my vote doesn't matter, or but I often kind of rebuttal that by saying if your vote didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying to suppress it so much. So so you see all these mechanisms around you to try to feed you misinformation, to try to keep you from of taking care of your rights and doing your rights and finding out information about the votes. So I think there's something to be said about that. And Marquise, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question to that, because you're in ground zero of voter suppression right now. What is the state of Georgia doing to sort of combat some of that voter suppression and misinformation? Because I know here in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois, we're battling misinformation as a whole, but voter suppression not so much. So I'd love to hear that.
Well, we've certainly been building wide-ranging coalitions to help deal with some of the issues. And so I work with an organization called Vote Riders, and we currently sit on the Georgia table, pro-Georgia. Well, there's about 40 other organizations. So there are organizations that do a little bit of everything. But one of the things that we do know in the basics of things is that Georgia is ground zero. We're the state where Stacey Abrams lost by less than 53,000 votes to someone who had erased millions of people off of the voting roll, who had enacted a system that they deem is the exact match system, which means that your name and your signature had to match exactly alike, which the Georgia Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional today. This year. And so we've also been dealing with them closing down precincts in a lot of majority African-American communities. And so the threat of what is happening across the country is very real in Georgia. And I think that there are a lot of people who are just deeply involved in seeing this thing through. And we've seen lines wrapped around buildings all across this state, beginning with early voting on last week, which is a good thing on one hand, but on the other hand, it's a shame that in the world's largest and oldest democracy, that we still haven't gotten down the practice of running elections just yet. And so in 2020, you should not be standing in line for 5 and 6 hours waiting to vote. That is what you call voter suppression. That's a voter tax, because people have other things to do. They have families to take care of and children to feed and bills to pay. No one has the time to sit and play games with election officials in order to make your voices heard. And I think that this year we have the battle of our lifetime, because I think that progressives and those that exist on the left have a great chance of beating 45. But the question becomes, do we have a fair and a free election? And I don't think that we do. I think that if any other country was running elections the way that the United States does, we would be over there demanding that they follow protocol and that they do things a little differently. And so I think that we all have to be on our tippy toes a little bit more, and make sure that we got people working the polls. So that's not an excuse. Making sure that people show up with their ID, making sure that people double check their polling precinct before they show up. If you have the ability to send an absentee ballot, you send your absentee ballot in and do that. But whatever you do, we got to vote. And I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna sit back and be quiet. But November the 3rd is not it is not the end. November the 3rd is not the beginning of voting, it's the end of voting. And so we've got to stop seeing voting as a day, but rather a season. We have 3 weeks to go and vote. And so we actually have no excuse why we do not vote candidates that reflect our community by November the 3rd.
Absolutely. Everybody is speaking so much truth right now. And I know Paris, you raised your hand.
Yes, to piggyback a little bit of what Marquise was saying, as far as voter suppression, it's in. I'm mute. Voter suppression is basically the lack of education. Period. And you can stand in the line because our ancestors stood in the line to their right. So why is it so much a problem when you're so like, oh, we got something to do? If it's important to you, you will stand in that line. You're going to stand and you're going to wait and you're going to make sure your information is correct. So I door knocked. I did all my signatures by myself so that my neighbors and voters could know who they're voting for. Now, when it got down to the challenging of the signatures, it's always a game. If we do not challenge the ultimate system on why another way of doing that, because it was the signatures don't match up. Now, let's say Mr. Johnson had a stroke. Mr. Johnson had a stroke and he can't sign the same way. But that signature is going to be challenged because he signed his driver's license 10 years ago that way. And because it's slightly different because he's writing with another hand or whatever, it's going to be challenged. So stuff like that, games, I particularly think that if we start bringing education to that would stop a lot of things. And that would stop candidates like myself to not be discouraged to keep pushing forward. Because you see that on the day when you're turning your signatures in and you're ready and you think you got everything crossed your T's, dot your I's, and everything's correct because you got on the ballot. So you know your stuff was correct, but then the incumbent comes, oh, Mr. Johnson didn't sign that right. But you saw Mr. Johnson, you talked to Mr. Johnson because Mr. Johnson said he's going to vote for you. And you saw him write that, his signature. Those are forms of voter suppression within the way we're going about even trying to become a candidate to be in the election. So we have so many obstacles to overcome. It's not just in the pre-stages of a candidate being on the ballot. Mm-hmm. We got a candidate here. He's been on the ballot 3 times and he still hasn't gotten elected. So it's not about the point of being on the ballot, because you can get there and they still won't elect you. And the reason being is because they're either your incumbent or your challenger, whatever you want to call it, they're giving this bad advice or talking bad about you. But your actions should be able to prove that you're the qualified one, that you're the one that's in the neighborhood doing the work. And I wanted to say with the elections, it don't end November 3rd. No, it doesn't. Because it's going to be another election in 2 more years and 4 more years. It's going to be another one. So candidates like myself will hold fast and still hold on to that hope. And we have to have people who get knocked down once or twice or maybe 3 times, because Barack didn't win his first time or second time. So we have to have people who are actually mentally capable or ready to go ahead and keep pushing, because you're going to get knocked down. You're not going to be voted in once or twice. You're going to probably get knocked down 1 or 2 times, but you have to be a willing candidate to keep pushing forward. You can't just allow the way the system is to defeat your goals. And the reason I'm pushing so hard for this write-in, because when we were trying to vote, that's what they made us do down south. They made you write. And those were the questions as a newly freed slave. Can you write your name? Those tactics, these are not new tactics. These tactics have been around for a long time, and we're just bringing them to light. So when I tell people like, oh, where writing candidate come from? It comes from the process down south too. It's been elevated where you have to write. And it was a test where they were like, with newly free slaves, can you write your name? So, or can you write the candidate that you want? A lot of people couldn't read, but you have, those things bother me so much because we don't know our history. We have to keep on. This is a lifelong journey of constantly going and reflecting.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to, I think that that's awesome. I just want to say, I think it's important that we name voter suppression what it is.
Yeah.
And we can't say that voter suppression is simply a lack of education. I think that voter suppression is a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, I
And
agree
I
with you on
think
that.
that I think it's a lot deeper than that. But I think that we do a disservice when we say simply that it's a lack of education. When it's more of a concerted effort from a racist system to prevent Black people from voting. Now that's what we should name.
Yeah,
I
can't
not
say
just
that.
a lack of education.
Yeah, I don't want to say that particularly on it's built upon race, because it was people who were white. They were white and they couldn't write. So the same system was addressed to them too. If you can't write the candidate, you're not going to be able to elect the candidate.
Race, though, I just think that they were so concerned on stopping Black people from voting that they didn't care if their lesser educated brethren voted or not. They just wanted to make sure that the Black people weren't voting. And so this
I just had a quick comment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. First of all, I voted already, and I suggest that people vote. But let me move that out of the way for a minute. History is extremely important. Education, as Paris mentioned, is excessively important, because it's lack of education that tells us to vote for people that we shouldn't vote for. It is a lack of an understanding of our history that allows us to participate in a system that has never been for us. If we look historically at the development of the parties, so Black folks became Republicans because of Abraham Lincoln. Then we gave that up when FDR got into office. We became Democratic because of the amount of work that they were doing in terms of the New Deal. We're now in a position where we're looking at which way do we go. But the reality is that when Obama was in office, were Black people generally, were their lives any better? No. Reality. So what a lot of Black people feel is participating in the system has not improved the quality of our lives since its existence. Now, let me just deal with two other pieces here. This country is designed around race, gender, and wealth. And our ability to be able to participate in it is to be able to look at those things. So when we talk about race, we're specifically talking about white people and their ability to control this country. When we're talking about gender, we're again specifically talking about white men and their participation in the control of this country. And then we're talking about wealth, because those are the groups that perpetuate what happens in this system of politics. They're the ones that put up the money. They're the ones that are buying the commercials. If it wasn't for the fact that we have such an idiot in the White House, our whole approach to this whole thing in Biden would be totally different. Reality. So as we look at our development, any politician that is not dealing with the mind and the body and the spirit of Black people in terms of how we reconstruct those and how we improve in those areas is not worth a dime as it relates to our communities, because we have to be mentally sound. Our educational systems have to be mentally sound. And what does that mean for our educational system? It means that we have to be teaching Black children to love themselves and to look at how they improve the quality of the Black community. If we're sending our students off to white universities so that they could be lost and never return to our communities, what have we done to ourselves and to them? And so we have to look at this whole mental issue. And then we have to look spiritually at how do we connect the spiritual side of ourselves so that we can connect in a way that we don't allow ourselves to fall into the same sort of traps that have been perpetuated by capitalism and by this system. One other thing, and I'll finish. Black Panther. Loved the movie. Loved Chadwick. Loved all the people in it. But look at how it was structured. The people with the money, the hierarchy, they had spaceships and lived up in the sky. But the people lived on the ground and they were still herding sheep and other kind of animals, even though they had spaceships and were rich. Because the constructor, the people that put that movie together could not see beyond capitalism and what it meant in terms of poor and the rich. Real. So as we begin to look, are the people that are running for office, what we have to look for them to say is, so how are you going to eradicate all the problems that you had before you got in the office? One of the things that I like about the alderman is the fact that she has a sensibility of what is real on the day-to-day. And unless you're attacking those day-to-day things from the ground up, our people will never be improved. The conditions of our folks. And that's ultimately what we have to deal with. Where are our children and who loves Black people is a legitimate question. And if we are not writing something that says to our elected officials that this is what we need to survive, and if you're not providing this, you're doing us a disservice, then we're not in the right place.
And I'll follow up with that as well. There definitely needs to be a Black agenda. I think that's something that we've seen on a local level, several various organizations, particularly organizations that focus around reparations for African-American descendants of slavery. But to get into some of the meat that you just dropped on us there, recently we've seen a recent poll just came out. This is again on a federal level, looking at the presidential candidates. I just wanted to throw that out there because you start to get into education and capitalism, and I think that this kind of plays into that. So the recent poll did a study of amongst African American men, seeming to see an increase in support for Donald Trump, and within that, I don't think there's not much that we can point to as African Americans and particularly as an African American man in this country that he's particularly done for our community, but to see an increase amongst African-American men and support for him is interesting to me. I would love to know your response or your thoughts on that, or in the rest of our panel as well.
Okay, quick comment. Trump has stolen a lot throughout his history as a person, right? But one of the things that he stole that is rather disconcerting to me is fake news. Mm-hmm. That concept, because Black folks have known that the news has been fake since we've been in this country. Say it again. It has never been worth agreeing with, and so we begin to defend the news as if they have never lied, and they have. They've always lied. He just called them on it. So I put no credence in polls. Ain't nobody called me. I'm not even sure that anybody's called anybody I've ever known. It's like the flu. People talk about more people die from the flu. I don't, in my life, and I'm 70, I don't know one person that ever died from the flu. I know a bunch of people that have died from the coronavirus, though. So when we talk about polls, I don't put a lot of credence in it, but when you talk to people on a day-to-day, I don't see no whole lot of Black folks running around talking about what a great thing that Trump has done. When I'm driving through South Shore or through Woodline, I don't see all these unemployment factors that they have been touting, talking about, Black folks are back at work. It's not real. And so we have to make sure that what is real for us is perpetuated. And the problem is that we've lost most of our media. Mm-hmm. We've lost the newspapers. We lost most of the radio stations.
Chicago Defender.
Huh?
The Chicago Defender.
Yeah, we
That
lost
was
a
good
lot of
paper.
them. And so there was the time that we had a source that we could trust to go to for information, at least from the Black side. And most of those are gone. And so now we are left to sort of run through the internet and see what we believe is true,
Right.
rather than knowing that it's the true source. So that's my feeling on that.
Yeah, barbershop talk.
Yeah. And even that is gone. Like during this period, there'll be a whole bunch of folks in barbershops talking about this now. Because our methods of communications are different.
Yeah.
As a people, we are just different. And we have to also face that. And so at the end of the day, we have to be looking at the long game. I did a panel on Afrofuturism not too long ago. And when I was on the panel, I asked people, can you see in your mind a future without white people? Can you even envision it? And what would it look like? And I'm not talking about killing them. I'm not talking about any of that. But can you envision a Black future without white people being your leading effort to determine what that means? Because if you can't, then we'll never be free. We have to be able to see a future of our children raising in their Blackness, reconnecting to their historic DNA, being able to be men so that we don't have to teach them to bow down and cower every time somebody looks at them. We tell them to pull up their pants like that's going to make a difference. They will get shot for sagging the same way they get shot if they had on a suit and tie. We're not dealing with the reality of it. We're trying to be accepted into a system that has never, ever been constructed for us. And we have to make the best of it. But at the same time, we have to look at how do we protect ourselves? And what does that mean in the long run? Manhood. How do we even define it today? Family, Blackness. What does it mean? And those are the challenges that we need to do, because when we talk about a political platform, we're talking about it within a construct of the Democratic and the Republican Party. We have to talk about a platform that frees us as a people, that restores us to our traditional greatness. That's the platform. Who's writing that? So.
And that kind of ties in a few of the different topic points we had to talk about, because to sum up what I'm hearing a lot of you are saying, and I'm over here taking notes, y'all, is that we have to know our true history to move forward. It's like saying Kofa, because I'm certain a lot of people today didn't know that we had the ability to vote. Black people in the 1800s after slavery were voting Black people into position in high numbers. That's when the killing started and the voter suppression started. It's because they were taking control of their vote and they were voting people in. A lot of people, I'm sure, probably don't know that. And then it happened where we couldn't vote. And then for everyone who's ever said, y'all still mad? Yes, I'm still mad, because we didn't get the right to vote until the 60s. That's for everyone who doesn't fully understand their history. And that's not just other races, that's Black people. Because I feel like we're doing a disservice to our children, because they're growing up now thinking they have it. They're growing up now thinking we've arrived, when it's so much work that needs to be done. This is why tapping into that history and really teaching them, for lack of better words, or for exactly what it is, who our true enemies are and who we truly are. And then, Alderwoman, I saw you raise your hand.
I did, because Malcolm X says better than anybody. Only the enemy will let you educate their kids. We're allowing this system to happen. I don't want us to forget that we built this country for free, and we still treated like second-class citizens. And so we always quick to say you need to vote or you need to do this, but when all kin folks ain't skin folks. And so let's not act like some of this oppression ain't come from our own people. And so that's the lesson I want us to get out this. That's number one. Number two, everybody that actually is in this system clearly doesn't understand their place. And so because I come from community organizing, I organize around what the community wants to see. You're not gonna go build a no white community and hire Black people. And matter of fact, I'll make it even plainer. Have you ever seen any Black folks working in Chinatown? I'll wait. You haven't. We're the only set of folks who allow this to happen. We would never be able to go up north in any of those communities and build a business and expect it to thrive. And so we need our own Black Wall Street. I definitely agree we need a Black agenda. But part of the problem with the Black agenda is we allow the elite folks, the folks who are far removed. There's an elected on the city council that makes $500,000. They've been there so long. And I can't tell you one piece of legislation they made to help the 1%. Because what we all need to remember we are the 1%. Donald Trump don't care about color. He care about dollars. And so I'm not surprised at a poll that says Black men are voting for Donald Trump. Those are those elite Negroes who think because they got a little money that the system won't eat them up. And I tell people all the time, greed has no end. It's me today, it'll be you tomorrow. And so for a system that has programmed us to mistreat each other, it has programmed us to be separate. It has programmed us to do all of the stuff that we complain about people doing. So when people be like, I ain't voting, that vote ain't done for me, I clearly understand why. And it's everybody's responsibility and duty to do two things. This is how we get people in the game: information and inspiration. I was not a candidate. I am not part of the Democratic Party. I'm an independent Democrat because they make you choose. That's number one. Number two, if you know my history, you will know I've never been a party any of this. As a matter of fact, I cussed out half of the city council before I even got there because them lazy people didn't do anything. And so people who know my history will tell you, I won the race because I went and asked people, what do you want to see in an elected official? What do you want for your community to do for you? What do you want to have your TIF dollars? So of course, I'm one of the hated elected officials. Mm-hmm. I'm one of the elected officials. When I stood up, when a young lady got hit in her mouth with a baton by the police, I got death threats. And want to know what I told them? You come to my house if you want to. You're going to walk in, you're going to let back out. And so it's and we got to protect each other. There are so many Black folks that are in my community that protect me and stand up for me, which is why I'm able to say what I want to say. And I said what I said. I don't change what I say. And so when it comes to this race, we're also tired of picking the one of the lesser evils. Let's not act like Biden ain't the cream of the crop. Biden was invited to the damn cookout. And of course, we taking him on. But we don't talk about all of the stuff Biden has done. So it ain't enough to just get him in. The one thing that I don't like nothing about 45. I'm never calling him president and I'm never calling his name. But he been honest. He been honest about what he was going to do to us, hasn't he, the entire time? And that's not what other people do. They make you feel good and say nice things of what they want to do. And then after the election, you don't hear from them. It's on us. But don't act like that wasn't taken from us and that they taught us to be different. They taught us to be crabs in a barrel. That ain't what we come from. They even told us, think about this, and I'm gonna stop at this. When you were in school, they taught you that people in Africa are swinging on trees, running around naked. And that's the furthest thing from what and they never admit to slavery, which upsets a lot of us. They won't admit that they stole us. And now you on Ancestry asking me to put down a deposit so I could find out where I came from when you stole that from me. And so let's not talk about what this racist white system has done to us. And so it's easy to blame the victim.
Mm-hmm. You're right about that.
Absolutely.
I just want to say one thing real quick. I'm an independent too. So just want to say it real quick. I'm an independent too. So I totally agree with all the women. Totally.
I think it goes back to what Mr. Rami was saying. We need our own platform. It's been wishy-washy since the beginning of time. And then to take back our control, to take back our power and know that when we vote, really vote, and not just go to the poll and say who we voting for, y'all, and not know any other names, nor
You just
Natalie,
muted
you
yourself,
on mute.
Natalie.
my bad, y'all. Until we create a system where we can actually go in and handpick. And I love that so many of you are just from the community. You're doing it because you're called to do it. You're activists because you see a need, you feel a need. And that's empowering. That's what politics should be. It should be people from and of the people speaking for the people. And so we need to start handpicking our candidates. So that kind of leads me into my next question. We kind of talked about some of the myths. We talked about the history and not truly knowing our history. Let's talk about how we can truly and what we can do to truly control our vote. What we can do as a community. I know we mentioned education. I'm a strong believer in that. I actually have a non-for-profit organization to open a school where we create those type of young people, where we teach them who they are to love themselves and every aspect of learning that they need, whether that be financially, opening businesses, spiritually, meditating, really creating for well-rounded children, because that's a necessity. And we have to take back that control. It's the same thing for the government and the people that they're throwing at us, and we're just choosing. How do we select these people, and how do we move forward to really create a better system? So I know the Alderwoman first, and then Paris, you'll be next.
So first of all, we need our own IPOs. The reason why people get into bed with wrong people, because they have the money. That's just what it is. We don't have our own independent political parties. And so you made to choose. It's either red, blue, and in some cases green. We need to be creating the people that we want to represent us and making sure that they represent our interests. So I'm gonna tell you something I do as an elected official, and y'all gonna think crazy. I give anybody that wants my personal cell number. Want to know why? Because you didn't elect my staff, you elected me. My platform is based on what I heard when I door knocked in the community. And I started door knocking a year before the election to ask people what they wanted to see and what should be happening with their community. We have stopped building relationships. We've let the internet and telephones and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter stop us from picking up the phone and say, hey, sister, how you doing? And we also forget that we need to help people in their present lives. If I'm trying to figure out how to feed my kids, you think I give a damn about voting for you? I don't. If I'm trying to figure out somewhere to lay my head at night and you come talking to me about voting, I don't want to hear it. Which is why in my mind, I've always said every elected official needs to be a community organizer that we pick, because then you understand. And we need to understand that the power that elected officials have, we gave to them. This power that I got to say what I want to say and do what I want to do is because I got a community of folks that'll stand behind me and say, you heard what she said. It better go this way. But I'm transparent and I'm honest, which is not easy in this space because our people are used to folks lying to them. When I tell the community, hey, we ain't gonna spend no money until you all vote and decide. People did not believe me, but I guaranteed you, as we speak, I'm on another call where people are asking developers, what you gonna do for our community? How many people from our community are gonna work there? Are you gonna make a living wage? If we want to unionize, we do that. And if they say no, you don't get to build in the 20th ward. That's not what people are used to, but that's how I'm running it. Because at the end of the day, I like to sleep at night. And I want to sleep with a conscience that I've done right by my people. And I came in the game. I'm glad I came in the game as late as I am. Because people always say, out of I probably was there was one other person that was older than me in a race of 17 people who ran in that race. Really 21 people put in for petitions. Only a certain amount made it. And so to Ms. Paris' point, it is a game that they play because they don't want progressive people in these spaces. I fought to get here. This was not easy. I had a bunch of sleepless nights. And during the election, I lost my mother. So right before, in January, here it comes in April, I lost my mother. My mother who lived in the house with me. My mother who moved with me because we couldn't afford to live anywhere else. And so just imagine running a race and you lose the one person in the world, because my father died when I was a kid, who loved you and who told you go do it. I know you're going to do it. And every time I thought about quitting, I heard her say, people that fought for you to be there. People are knocking doors with you. You ain't alone and you not by yourself. And that's what we got to get back to. But relationships and us getting to know each other. You can't live next door to somebody and don't know who your neighbors is. I know everybody on this daggone block and they all got my numbers. as an elected, because I don't think I'm better than anybody. And I'm taught that. I could be in a room with a PhD and somebody with a bachelor's. You ain't no better than me. You put your pants leg on one leg at a time. And because we done made some of these Negroes feel like they entitled and they better than somebody, that's why they don't do nothing.
Well, all right now.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, Nia.
I feel the strength. I love it. And I agree with her wholeheartedly because I eat and breathe Roseland, and I've lost so much and sacrificed so much, and I know my neighbors wholeheartedly. And I want to say I agree wholeheartedly with Alderwoman, and I'm like shaking because it's almost like the same situation. And what I wanted to add to this is, why don't we, and I think this would be a benefit to everyone, if we just form the independent party as the Black Party. And if we did that, we're not tied to anyone. We can seek out our own money. We can seek out our own funding, because as a aspiring politician coming into the political field, I get that a lot. Well, who's endorsing you? And then when the minute you get endorsed by somebody from the machine, you're a part of it, period. You lose your whole integrity. You lose everything about it. You become the pawn. You stop being a individual. They take your voice and you don't stand up, and you can't say what you want to say, and you can't be spunky and idealistic. You can't be anything. You got to work for the machine. We've had 45 years of the same person in Springfield. It's baffling to me that we are still in this Republican Democrat. How about we have an independent party on thinking, progression as far as organization? And I think Malcolm X said, if we organize, that's dangerous, right? So I think that's the part where we lack. And if the minute we get organized, I believe that's probably my calling in a sense, and maybe Alderwoman can tag in with me, because we're independent and they don't like that. They want you to be in bed with someone. And I keep getting my door knocked on saying, hey, Paris, I can fund you, but I'm saying no. I'll take it on. I'll take the risk on my own. And oh, you're a nice girl. You're a nice lady, and you can stand for this. I don't want to stand for that. I want to stand for what my community want, because you're not going to help me. You're going to take me and you're going to endorse me, and then I'm never going to be able to say what I want to say. I'm going to be a pedestal candidate, and that's what we have in office. So why would I want to go along with the same thing that we have? It doesn't make sense. I believe the first thing is we build relationships with the community as far as a party that is independent. That's where we will be successful.
Now, I just want to add a couple of historic points.
Right.
So my mother was part of the Democratic machine. She was a poll worker. We lived at Stateway Gardens at the time. And so from 1959 till about 68, she was involved in that process. So the original Mayor Daley, the daddy, right before the election, they would come down to the projects and pass out chickens. When they finished with the chickens, they would do a big party at the Armory on 55th Street, and they would provide free alcohol and all that kind of stuff for people to come in. Following that, they would have buses that would line up at the projects, that they would take people to the polls, and they would force them to vote in the way that they wanted them to vote. So even though we talk about the Voters' Right Act, a lot of us were still being controlled by patronage and what was happening in that political system. So one other comment. The Alderwoman talked about her being a community organizer and the fact that maybe community organizers are the people that we should count on. What I do know is that if I didn't see you before you decided to run, I shouldn't see you running. You know, if you're not out in the community, if you're not part of that fixture, if you're not fighting for things that are going on, and then you decide, I had lunch with the person who was, okay, mention that. Okay, so anyway, I had lunch with a person whose mother had been in politics, and he was considering running for office. So we're sitting at the table, and so I said, well, what's your platform? He said, well, I got to see if the people love me. I said, well, what the hell does that mean? well, you know, if people love me, then I'm going to run. And I just thought that to be so crazy. You don't have a position. You just trying to see if you can get out and get some advertisement done and fool people into voting you into office, because that's kind of what that was about. And so I think the idea of organizing an independent party, which has to do with our ability to be able to control the educational system, how we are introducing people, how we select our own leaders, and it has to be done in every level. You know, we still have stars that other people are picking for us. We have authors that other people are picking for us. We have artists that other people are picking and saying that these are our great folks. We should be in the position where we control that.
Definitely believe that we need our own everything. I've always been a strong believer that we need our own everything. And my work that I do backs that, like starting the Healing Academy not-for-profit to create a school that teaches our children for ourselves, creating Melanated America, because Mr. Rami, you mentioned we don't have that credible media source anymore. We don't have that. That's what I strive for Melanated America to be, with no backing from anyone that's not for the mission of Melanated America, which is telling the true stories of melanated people and highlighting melanated people and telling what we need to hear. And so with that being said, and then with all of you being called, because that gentleman who said he needs to be loved by the people before he do definitely was not called to do the work, but all of you chose to do this work, chose to take on the hardships, financially support yourselves and your campaigns, and do the work because you saw the need and you're fulfilling those needs. So I'm taking my notes, and what I'm gathering as we start to kind of round it, because I do want to make sure we look at if there's any questions from the audience members as well. So if you guys are watching, go ahead, please write down some questions so that we can answer. But just to kind of go through, we mentioned community. Forming a community and being on one accord, everyone coming together to support the people that we need to support. Picking our own candidates, because what we are doing now is literally the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, hoping and wishing and praying that a different outcome is going to come, is literally the definition of insanity. So choosing our own candidates, creating our own party so we don't have to just go off the Democrat or Republican. And then also doing the community work on our own end so that we know what the community needs. And then outside of just voting, we're helping to benefit our communities as well. So these were just some of the things I wanted to recap for the listeners on how we can truly not only take control of our votes, but take control of our community as well, and hold the elected officials accountable, because we need to take back our power also.
And Natalie, the other thing is that irrespective of all the stuff that we talked about, and all of it is legitimate, the first thing we got to do is get that idiot off of Pennsylvania Avenue, and McConnell and Graham need to go with him, and as many other Republicans as we can get out of there. So the fact is that carnage and craziness has to stop, you know. But all of the other factors that we've discussed are excessively important. But I don't want any of them to discourage people from going out to vote him out.
And that's a part of the myths.
The next one. Yeah.
So like some of the myths and things like that we kind of addressed earlier about our vote doesn't matter. Marquise spoke to that, when we do definitely need to vote Buddy out of office. that's a guarantee. And no, the alternative is not the best alternative. But like you said, we do still need to get him out of office and get to a better playing ground. But even outside of the presidential election, one thing that I definitely want us to talk about is to talk about local as well. Because I mentioned at the beginning is that we kind of tend to only vote for the major elections. We tend to only vote for the president. We tend to only vote for the mayor, sometimes the governor. But when we're talking about really creating change in our communities, we also need to talk about the other levels, many plethora of other positions, we have to look at and to be informed voters to truly take control of our vote. And so since we have an alderwoman and someone who's running for state representative, and Mr. Rami, you've helped on those political campaigns as well, how do we inform people and get on one accord with the people that really represent what we need in our communities on those lower levels?
Well, I think the first thing is what the alderman talked about, which is identifying the thing that people most need in their individual communities. And those are all individualized. And so if you have community folks that say, I would be happy if we just had garbage cans in the alleys, then you fix those. You fix the things that they are being impacted by on a day-to-day basis, then you can get them to the broader issues. But you've got to start there. You've got to start with, looking at the fact that we have so many food deserts. You have to look at the fact that that police brutality has been an issue forever. People talking about, we're gonna make amends with police. I don't even understand when it was ever mended. It's never been
Right.
great. And so I do think we can look at a more focused, community-based issues that will drive people to support the politician that can then help to step up to the other levels. Because if you're feeding people, if you're housing them, if you are supporting their needs, they will get behind you and your efforts.
So that goes back to hitting the streets and really making sure you're engaging with the people in your community.
And learning to listen. Being available just to listen to folks and getting and understand that what they say is real to them. It might not be your reality, but it's real to them. And so those are some of the things that we have to address. So
absolutely. So we're going to start bringing it around. Why or if do you all feel that the educated vote is a part of the revolution? Paris?
If you don't know, and if you don't read, or if you're not informed, that is the crutch that we have. And that's where the disenfranchisement comes in at right there. If we don't do anything different and we sit around a round table and just talk about these things and not execute these things or have any influence of a difference as far as pushing forward to change them, we're going to still come back to this table and still talk about the same thing. Now, as a state representative, hopeful, elect, I hope that my influence, because I have a good relationship with my community, and because people know me and see me on a day-to-day basis, and because I do a lot of things in my area, I hope that influence and also build that relationship back where we had a disconnect with my incumbent. He doesn't do the things that I do. He's not approachable or in relationship building. I went to countless of funerals. I went to 3 little babies' funerals this past summer to build a relationship with that family and to know that, hey, you have someone that is really rooting for you and have your back. And if you need me, call me, not email me, call me at direct line, just like Alderwoman said. I believe in that. And if anyone was to ever go on my page, I gave my number to make sure that you have that relationship with me and you can call me any time of night, because I feel like that's where we have fallen apart. And providing those personal relationships with voters and your neighbors and family, we can build a better relationship with a state representative or alderman, things like that. But when you get to a point, you forget those things, and I don't know what happens with the people that are not in office and they change, but they forget that they are a part of the neighborhood and that they live there too. And hopefully I can bring that back also with finding sources of financial. Now, if I go to a family's house and they tell me, hey, I don't want to vote because I got to put food on the table. Oh, and I'll just sit there and stare at them at the door. No, I'm going to help them. The thing is, we are servants. If you're in politics, you are a servant. You serve to the people. You're not, the people don't serve you, you serve them. And that's what public office is, a public servant. And as a future state representative or hopeful, I will bring that back because we don't have that. We don't have those people that are, and I'm actually very proud of Alderwoman Jeanette because she actually embodies the same thing that I'm trying to reach across the board, because that's something that I can trust if I was going to vote for someone that is in office right now. We don't have that. So by we not having that, it's my duty and my job to provide those services and also be available to my neighbors, my friends, my family, everyone all the time. Now, granted, I may not be available all the time, but I promise you I'm going to call you back or text you back. I'm a texter. And I think that with that influence, I can build a better understanding as what a state representative represents.
Absolutely.
My,
Alderwoman?
my only, yeah, and I have to run for another meeting, but my comment to that, Natalie, is that our position in life has a great deal to do with how we respond to things. So the NBA players, the reason that they're responding to Black Lives Matters and things like that is because when they walk out, when they take that uniform off, and when they walk out of the stadium, they are in the same place as the rest of us. However, wealth has a great deal to do with community. And so if you're living in these communities where you're not bothered by all the issues or the social issues that relate to our communities, then you don't have the same kind of feeling or involvement. But education is not necessarily a separator from that. So you have people that are teachers that still live in Woodlawn or still live in Inglewood. And so they have more of an accountability to trying to improve their property value than some people that have moved out to Evanston and are so far away from us that they're not interested in being involved in any way. So I think that the challenge that all of us have is to connect people on the levels in which they feel that they are connected so that we can pull from them the needs and the services that are required to help us to move to the next level. So that would be my answer to that. And I just have to say before, as I'm leaving, as I'm running behind for this other Zoom session I have to do, it's been a pleasure being on with you all and to get a chance to talk. And thank you for inviting me, Natalie. And I look forward to the opportunity of doing this again.
Thank you. We probably gonna need a part too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rami. All right, Alderwoman.
He said it. It ain't really nothing I can say other than we don't connect the dots for people just about these systems all together. I'm going through this thing now of people are complaining about the post office. And I have to explain to people that's a federal institution that I have no control over. You got to call your congressman, you got to call your senator, you got to do that. But that's basic civics that our people don't know. And so people like, I don't care if you don't control that institution. I want you to figure out how we get our mail. And so it's those relationships with other electeds to say, look, if they calling me about something, I suggest you get on it. Because I'm giving them your number and they're going to have to talk to you. But I think we don't connect the dots about electeds, what this system actually does and does not. Like with the census, people don't know that you're getting a certain amount of money for every person that's counted in the census. And that is the same money that you use to have your day, you take your kid to a free daycare. If you need TANF, which is cash assistance for public aid, if you need LINK, if you need a medical card, and those are things that I've needed through my life. I made it with those type of supports. And so just because I got a few more dollars in my account don't mean I diss it. Because the same way that I went climbing up the ladder is the same way I can be let down. And so I never forget that in this space that I'm in. And I let people know that I'm also human. I got feelings. We might not agree on politics. I say this about Mayor Lori Lightfoot all the time. I may not agree with her politics, but I respect her as a Black woman because we already have two strikes. We are Black and we are women. And it's already hard for us in politics and in a lot of these spaces because we ain't been listened to. And so I definitely don't disagree, but we got to be able to connect the dots for folks and see how voting and politics and elections affects their everyday life. If we don't do that, we'll continue to be talking about the vote turnout was low. We got people in office we don't want to see because we're not doing the work. And it ain't easy work, it's hard. You know how many times I got to go to somebody's door and they tell me we don't want no more affordable housing here. But now that you see the property taxes are going up and you can't afford them, you rethinking about that affordable housing, aren't you? You thinking about the new businesses that are going to come to the community because the Obama presidential summit is coming. Can't we recycle our own wealth? Can't we own those institutions we used to? And so it's just some basic stuff that we got to do. But definitely, I tell people all the time, information and inspiration. Inspire me. Make me feel like that we're the same. Don't make me feel like you better than me. A lot of my opponents got knocked down because of this sense of entitlement. I ain't entitled to nobody's vote. I'm entitled to nothing. Everything that I get and work for is because I work for it, and I'm willing to have those conversations. And they hard, y'all. They are hard and they hurtful. Going to babies' funerals. When I first got in the office, 13-year-old kid gets shot in his back when he does everything right. He playing basketball, he being good. His father let him go visit his mother, and they went to visit a neighbor. Nobody wants that in our community. But we don't talk about how the guns get in our community. We don't talk about the people who's supposed to be protecting us actually protecting us. And at the end of the day, either we gonna hang together or we gonna hang together.
I hear that.
I love her energy so much.
I purposely was quiet for a minute, so I need them to catch that. We gonna hang together or we gonna hang together. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. So I just want to say thank you all. I hope everyone who's watching share this post. Make sure you get the information. Some things that I really want to let everybody know, and then I would definitely want you ladies to give your last remarks or any advice or things that you want to speak to directly. But I want to let everyone know that early voting has already started. Like one of our panelists has already said, the 3rd is the last day to vote. Start voting now. Start researching now. I hope this inspired you all to become educated voters and not just go with who's ever Democrat, or really take the time to research who you're voting for and see what they can do for our communities on every level. Okay, don't just go check the box for the president and leave. Really do your research and look at the information and the people that's there and write in some candidates if you need to. Okay. Get it done. That's that. Also, outside of do your research, we have the choice. After this election is over, similar to what Paris said, that part of the election is over, but it's ongoing. Immediately, we need to start rallying our troops, selecting the people that stand on the same issues we stand on and backing them. Like Marquise said earlier, put our money where our mouth is, hit the streets for these people, sign petitions for these people, support the people that's trying to support you. That's the only way we can change, create a true change and get the people in office that is for us and that's for our communities. Outside of that, you can create change. Take your power back. We have given our children to the system to educate. We have given our will to the system to just do and flow, and we just moving within it, but you can change it. And marching is one thing, and it's a whole lot of ways to go about it. But if you really want to create change, say, I got this. Take your power back. Tell everybody else around you to take their power back, and collectively do your research. Rally the people that's for the community and do this. And if you can't find the person, be the person. Like these two beautiful women right here. They found it upon themselves to run for these offices. And I'm speaking into existence. Get these offices, okay? Because they saw a need. If you can't find the person, be the person. Y'all encouraging me. I might want to run for alderman, doggone it, okay? I might be calling y'all later. But because it's up to us. If it's going to happen, nobody else is going to make it happen for us. You got all of these people, like Alderman said, they shaking and dancing. They out here waving in your face and making you believe that they're for you so you can vote for them, but they're really not for you. So it's time for us to create that change and really take our power back. If you can't find the person to push to back that's going to be there for your community, then you be that person. You can vote for them or you can become that person, okay? They didn't let you know today. And then just don't vote, y'all. Just don't vote. Go vote, but just don't vote. You hear me saying? After you vote, do the work. Go into the community, find some organizations that stand on the same things you stand for, and be that change you want to see. Don't just vote and think that's it. Do the work in your community. Do the work on yourself and do the work in your home, because that's where it starts, and then spread outward. Okay? And then whoever's elected, if it's not the person you wanted to be elected, take your power. You paying them bills. Hold them accountable. Period. Hold them accountable because you're paying their salary. So those were some of the points that I definitely wanted to leave on people. Vote, y'all. Vote and be educated voters. That's how we gonna break this cycle. Don't just go out to the polls doing whatever. Really take this seriously so we can create change. Ladies, is there any closing remarks, any thing that you want to drop to the people before we go?
Gotta tell everybody that you have to write my name in on the ballot for the 28th District of Illinois. I'm a future state representative of the 28th District. Write my name, Paris Walker Thomas. I'm pushing. Win, lose, or draw, I am still here. I'm not going anywhere. Give me a call, 312-636-3091. I don't care if it's on the World Wide Web. Please call me. If you do not see the box under my incumbent, I left this video on my page before. My name is Paris Walker Thomas. You have to write my name in for the 28th District.
Hey, now, sis.
So I guess I got the last words. Be encouraged. We are living in times that nobody is unsure of, but as Black folks, we always prevail. Remember, we're the person that they carried millions of miles overseas, and a lot of us made it. And so we got that staying power. We know how to make it. We know how to uplift each other. We know how to work with each other. And just remember that trouble do not last always. I'm in office because some people thought enough of me to get up and go to the polls and elect me in there. And while some people hated my guts and didn't want somebody as progressive with me, thought I was too to the left, they work with me every day and they hold me accountable, which keeps me humble. Always forget, we stood on the shoulders of somebody to get what we are. And we have to continue with that. Learn your history, never forget it, and don't be afraid to ask. I am Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, the 20th Ward. My number is 773-620-9055. Call me. I mentor young ladies. I still help with education. I do it all. And it's because it's a need for it. Shirley Chisholm says it best, and I'll end with this. The rent you pay on this earth is service to others.
Come on. And with that being said, y'all, because that's perfect, I'm going to end with a quote as well. This is Dr. Margaret Burroughs. If y'all don't know her, y'all better do some research, okay? That's what we're talking about today. Be educated. I am but one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I should do. What I should do, I ought to do. What I ought to do, I will do. That breaks every myth or story or roadblock you put in front of yourself. I'm just one person, but you one person. And imagine if everybody just lived their life that way, how different the world would be if we all just did what we could. Do the work, y'all. It starts with being an educated voter. Do the work, and then do the work in your community after that to create the change you want to see. All right, y'all. We might have to do this again. We might have to do it again.
Closer to election so we can see how